Hello, I'm Dennis Salguero, and I'd like to present you with some information on the CMIS enablement within TRIRIGA. Before we really jump into the information, I'd like to go over some important terminology. This terminology will be important in order to understand all the different terms and items that I'm going to go over. To begin, you're going to be hearing the term ECM a lot, and that stands for Enterprise Content Management. This is a system that most enterprises have implemented in order to manage anything related to documents and records. ECMs have become very important over the last 10 years or so, given that companies are under increased audit and SOX requirements. Most companies are concerned with things like document retention, document metadata, things along those lines, and then converting that to records management. So a lot of the clients that have TRIRIGA installed are also going to have some sort of ECM system somewhere in their enterprise. Most large software vendors like IBM, EMC, Microsoft, they all contain some sort of ECM solution in their product families. For IBM, the solution is either FileNet or IBM Content Manager. You're also going to be hearing a lot about CMIS, and that stands for Content Management Interoperability Services. In a nutshell, this is an ECM industry standard API. All the ECM vendors came together to establish a single API that would work with a variety of ECMs. That allows a software vendor to write one set of code that will work across all ECMs that have implemented the CMIS standard. Finally, I'm going to be referring to a CMIS gateway. That is essentially a middleware HTTP server that stands in between the ECM and any other applications that want to talk to it via CMIS. CMIS communicates over an HTTP protocol. The CMIS gateway translates that protocol into the particular ECM that is being targeted or implemented. That also means that these gateways are vendor specific. Each ECM out there has a corresponding gateway middleware that needs to be installed in order for CMIS to work. So the customer profile for somebody that's interested in CMIS integration are the enterprises that are compelled to centralize all their document management in a single ECM system. As I mentioned, a lot of ECM needs are audit driven, which basically means that any documents that are not managed by a single ECM could present a liability to that enterprise. So TRIRIGA customers that want to fall under that sort of central enterprise policy and also have an alternative to how they store documents in the TRIRIGA database are going to be interested in anything related to CMIS compatibility. Overall, this presents a nice alternative to the current TRIRIGA structure. As it stands, TRIRIGA customers only had one option for storing their documents. They are stored as blobs in the database. By integrating CMIS capabilities into TRIRIGA, there is now an alternative storage solution that can help TRIRIGA documents better fall under enterprise content management guidelines, depending on what that enterprise needs. So let's look at what a general architecture would look like for an install. To the left, we have our TRIRIGA server. In the center, we have the CMIS gateway. Again, that's a middleware HTTP server. And then to the right, we have our ECM system. It is possible that some companies that already have an ECM server do not have a CMIS gateway. Other enterprises will. It all depends on whether they have other applications outside of TRIRIGA that are enabled for CMIS or not. We are unable to support or work with clients that do not already have some sort of CMIS gateway installed in their enterprise. Any support prior to a TRIRIGA customer having a CMIS gateway already up and running in their enterprise would probably fall outside the scope of the support that TRIRIGA teams can offer. Therefore, it is imperative that TRIRIGA teams have to work hand in hand with their ECM teams in a phase 0 prior to utilizing the CMIS capabilities of TRIRIGA. In that process, with the ECM teams, they're going to have to figure out which object stores are going to be used within the ECM, which folders are going to be used. They're going to probably have to go through some sort of capacity planning process in order to see how the TRIRIGA use is going to have an impact on the overall ECM. And then you're also going to have some sort of discussion around storage and retention policies. As I mentioned there, some enterprises will already have a CMIS gateway. They've already had other applications that require it. For others, this will be a brand new install, a brand new need. What those gateways look like and what those install cycles require are all going to be all dependent on the ECM vendor. At some point, we will have to encourage our TRIRIGA clients to have those conversations with their ECM teams and their ECM vendors in order to determine what installs they need to happen if they do not have a CMIS gateway already installed. So the general steps that are created are: we need to verify that the enterprise has an ECM that supports CMIS. In some cases, there are some ECMs that do not support CMIS. We need to verify that the enterprise has a CMIS gateway that can also interface with the ECM. The way we can verify this is using a third-party program like Apache Chemistry Workbench that verifies connections between a gateway and an ECM. Once we have verified that there is indeed a valid gateway and a valid ECM that can communicate with that gateway, then we are ready to make modifications to TRIRIGA, which include modifying the TRIRIGA web properties file. All of the items that you see here in the planning requirements all come from the individual client's ECM team. Your average TRIRIGA administrator is not going to know any of these items here. They are going to have to come from somewhere within the enterprise based on whatever capacity planning and storage retention requirements have gone through. These settings will be assigned to the individual TRIRIGA admins. Once that process is done, this is an example of a properly configured TRIRIGA web properties file that enables CMIS. In the first section, in line 170, you can see that the enable CMIS flag is set to Y. We have a CMIS URL. Note that that is a URL that the gateway will be assigning. That is not a URL that should correspond directly to the ECM. Generally speaking, ECMs do not have URLs that you can assign to. You then have a user information, and then you have a password. That password is encoded via the TRIRIGA administrator console. In line 174, you can see that there is a CMIS store. That is the name of the object store. Again, that is something that will be assigned to TRIRIGA admins from their ECM teams. Finally, under line 175, you have a CMIS root. That is the internal ECM ID for a root folder that will serve as the root for all the other documents that will be passed in from within TRIRIGA. The documentation makes it clear that this needs to be an ID. However, inevitably, users will most likely have a name in here instead of an ID. This must be an internal ECM ID, not a folder name. Generally speaking, a user will not have to follow any different steps in order to use the CMIS features. For this particular release, CMIS is an alternative storage for the document objects within TRIRIGA. They will no longer be stored in a database, they will instead be stored in an ECM system. For most users, that difference is blind to them. They do not know where they are storing their documents. There are no different visual cues. There are no different items that they will notice that indicate that they are saving to an alternative system. For this release of TRIRIGA, there is no migration path for existing installations. CMIS enablement for this version of TRIRIGA is intended for new clients doing new installs of TRIRIGA. The primary integration point for all CMIS enablement is within TRIRIGA's document manager. The document manager also stores other items that are created via things like the Notes and Documents tabs or workflows. But again, there are no different visual cues or different indicators that a user will notice. All the storage between the database and the ECM is blind to those users. It will happen without them even knowing it. For general troubleshooting, we would work backwards from the ECM itself. So the first items to look at is the ECM itself available and can the assigned service account log in? ECMs, for the most part, provide some sort of web interface where you can see your object stores and documents. Is the service account able to log into that interface? If that is the case, there should also be checks for general ECM functionality, such as available disk space, any workflows that are stuck, any other sort of object store items that can be affecting the overall performance of the ECM. If the ECM checks out, then we work backwards and find out if there is communication between the CMIS gateway and the ECM. Given that the gateway itself is also middleware, there can be communication issues between those two servers. CMIS gateways, for the most part, provide a dashboard status that demonstrate which object stores and which ECMs they are able to communicate with. You would need to verify that the CMIS gateway lists the particular object store you want as an object store that it has valid communication with. The next item to check is if the gateway itself is accepting communication from other CMIS applications. So this is where Apache Chemistry Workbench comes in handy again. The workbench can be used to test connectivity. The workbench is a good way to test because it's a third-party tool that is very reliable in connecting to CMIS systems. If you are unable to connect via Apache Chemistry Workbench, then there is probably something still wrong on the overall ECM architecture. Once you are able to connect with a Chemistry Workbench and verify that the ECM does indeed respond in the way you expect it to respond, then you can narrow it down to it being an issue within TRIRIGA. TRIRIGA CMIS tasks have verbose logging. You can filter on those tags, you can filter within the log by looking for CMIS, and that will show all communication or attempted communication between TRIRIGA and the CMIS servers. This is what a valid login for in a CMIS gateway looks like within Apache Chemistry Workbench. You'll notice that these are identical settings than what we saw in the web in a TRIRIGA web properties file. You have a URL to your CMIS gateway, you have a username, you have a password, and then down towards the bottom you can see that there is the name of an object store there that is being used to connect. If there is a problem with the CMIS gateway, Chemistry Workbench will let you know that. Otherwise, once you are able to connect via Chemistry Workbench, then you can move on to looking into problems with TRIRIGA. You should not proceed to support to try to find a fault within TRIRIGA until you are able to properly connect with the Chemistry Workbench. This here is an example of a CMIS gateway reporting back which object stores and repositories it is able to connect to. For this particular example, this is the CMIS gateway for FileNet connecting to a FileNet P8 server. In our properties file, we were using the TRI-POC and the TRI-QA object stores. Since those object stores are properly listed here, we can assume that there is good communication between the CMIS gateway and the ECM. Until a client can provide us with this type of dashboard snapshot and show that there is communication between their gateway and their ECM, then TRIRIGA support would probably fall outside of this scope. Any other support needs prior to showing this type of gateway connectivity should probably be handled internally between TRIRIGA teams and their respective ECM teams. I want to stress again that there is no plug-and-play version of CMIS enablement for TRIRIGA. All of these installations are going to have to go through some sort of process with their internal ECM teams in order to establish all of the required resources. The scope of support directly from TRIRIGA should be fairly limited until a TRIRIGA client can demonstrate a working CMIS gateway and have all the needed property configuration sections filled out. Any capacity issues around this type of installation will almost certainly be limited by the ECM itself. There will be very little capacity limitations from within TRIRIGA. As far as design limitations, in this initial rollout of CMIS, publications are not supported, copy and paste are not supported, and cut and paste are not supported. These are three important references for working with CMIS. The first one goes to the working group for the protocol standard. The protocol doesn't change that often. The last approved version of 1.1 was back in 2012, but it helps to keep an eye on this working group's webpage. The TRIRIGA implementation makes use of the Apache chemistry files that are downloadable from this particular link. On that same website, you can find the Apache chemistry workbench that is used to test CMIS connectivity. Thank you for your time.